Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay, they are visible. Hello, thank you everyone for listening. Can you see the whole current slide just to confirm, because I can't see what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'll be talking today a little bit about what I've learned about sponsoring Koha development and just in general about working with open source software projects as not a developer, but someone who wants something developed. I'm the right person for this talk because I was the release manager for Koha 3.12. I've developed a number of features for Koha. I've worked with other unrelated open source projects, and I've worked with a lot of libraries and other institutions who were interested in bringing in some sort of building some sort of additional functionality in the open source software they use, but perhaps didn't know exactly how to go about doing that in a way that would, to the extent possible, guarantee their inclusion.
Jared, we are.
Yep.
If you are, we are not looking for the slides.
You can't see the slides.
No, we are.
Okay.
We see your main window.
Okay. Let's see. Huh. Okay.
I will see you.
Try. Are the slides visible now?
No.
No. Okay, let's try.
You should share your desktop.
Okay, let me try that then. Let's share. Okay, are the slides visible now?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. So the first issue that most, if not all, development projects run into is scoping. We have to, as developers and as people who want developers to do things for us, we have to determine exactly what it is we want done or want to do, and we have to communicate that to the people who need to know. So I've prepared the slides in the form of hints for sort of lessons I've learned mostly the hard way. So the key to project scoping are you need a clear definition of what the scope is. So, for example, I am a heavy user of authorities in Koha. And one of my earlier projects included the scope, improve the authority module so that it is more usable. Needless to say, that project didn't get very far. In hindsight, what I really needed was to define exactly what needed improvement. For example, improve the identification of duplicate authorities in Koha's authority module And ideally, I should even have gone a little bit further and said, improve Koha's identification of duplicate authorities so that two authorities with the exact same heading will be recognized as duplicate, even if there are slight punctuation changes. Second point on project scoping is buy-in from stakeholders. So when I'm developing for myself, I'm pretty much the only stakeholder, but as librarians, we're generally not just developing something for ourselves. It's for our users, it's for our staff, it's for, at least to some extent, the developers who are building it, and it's for the larger community in an open source project like Koha. It's not enough for us to develop something for us. What we really want is to develop something for Koha that we can then use and take advantage of, and people we've never met halfway around the world can also use and take advantage of. And the way to convince people that your idea is a good one is define it clearly, first of all, but also communicate it clearly. So that when someone says, could you explain to me what exactly you're working on? You're able to say, absolutely. This project is important because it will save 50% of the time of the people who manage authority files. It will mean that fewer developers have to answer questions about how authorities work. It means that the reference librarians will be able to use authorities. Whatever benefits there may be, you want to communicate clearly with scoping. And once you've defined the scope, of course, you need to actually get started on the project and look at designing the project not in terms of user interface, but in terms of how is the project going to go in the week, month, or year that you'll be working on it. And what I have learned, again, mostly the hard way, is that the keys are minimal impact on other areas of the system. It's all very well to have a wonderful idea, but if your idea requires changing not just the authorities module, but also circulation and the OPAC and acquisitions, it's not going to work well because someone else is going to do some work and on one of those areas, and suddenly you're going to have to start over. The second thing I've learned is the importance of milestones. If you can't measure your progress, it's really hard to keep people excited, especially in a project as large and as large and as busy as Koha. You don't want your project to appear to drag so long that your QA team, for example, concludes that you're not working on it and perhaps misses when you finally submit your final version during a particularly busy time. Sorry, Tomas just told me that I'm not entirely audible. Is that any better, Tomas?
You need to keep close to the mic, to the microphone. Is that?
I'm using a headset. So it's as close to my mouth as it can get. I will see if I can increase the volume somehow. Let's see. It is, yes. So the volume is all the way up. Hopefully you can mostly hear me. I'll try and talk louder. So I mentioned measurable milestones, and the other thing, as I indicated before with the minimal impact on other areas of the system, when you're designing a project, you always want to think about what else is happening. Is there any way I can make, you know, Kyle's life easier by doing something that I was pretty much going to be doing anyway? Or alternatively, is there a way I can avoid making Paul's life more difficult by choosing one of two options that, from my point of view, are equally good? And once we've planned out the project, obviously the next step is actually developing it. As a release manager, my very favorite thing to hear was, I have some code and I've released it. Even if I was hearing that followed by, however, it's awful and please don't use it, that heads up and the visibility of the code early in the process meant that I could actually plan ahead to a certain extent and make sure that the developments that were going on were actually being incorporated. Another thing that I appreciated was being asked for my thoughts on any development questions that were eventually going to need my thoughts. And the earlier you asked a question, either of the release manager, Tomas at the moment, or of the other developers, the more useful the feedback you can get. I've learned that from both sides. As a developer, there have been a few projects where I did not necessarily ask for feedback early enough, and invariably this involved starting over, which is not something that you really want developers to be doing. Finally, you always want your developers to follow any coding guidelines or best practices that are in effect for the project. In the case of Koha, there is a wiki page with coding guidelines that you can easily refer your developers to. So the good news is we've now finished the development, and we're moving on to the most important aspect of the process of getting code into Koha or any other active system. Testing. Testing is, without a doubt, the most important part of every development project I've worked with, because it's easy to write code that doesn't work. It's a lot harder to make sure the code works. So testing is also, unfortunately, one of the hardest parts, because developers can't really test their own code, because in many cases we are so accustomed to what we expect it to do that we're going to conclude that it's working, even if the way it's working is, well, crazy. So it's important to bring in other people to do testing, and in order to get other people involved, people not involved in the original development, you really have to help people understand why they should care. And that is, for all of us, a really challenging thing, because we all know why we care about a particular feature we want. But if other libraries don't work the same way, don't have the same workflows, they might not see any reason to care. And that's where our good communication comes in, and making sure that we really communicate to people the benefits for our libraries, and for libraries that maybe need something a little different but could use our feature. And then these next two are particularly important in a project as large as Koha. There are always a ton of features needing testing, and people are a lot more likely to spend the time to thoroughly test your new feature if they know that you're the type of organization that will spend the time to test their new feature. And so I really cannot emphasize enough the importance of good faith and making an effort to test other people's code. And I know that a lot of people hate to be in the situation where they have to mark something as failed because it doesn't work. But as a developer, I would much rather know early, oh, sorry, the development doesn't work, and fix it, than find out at the 11th hour that, oh, the reason no one has finished testing my development is because no one could figure out how to get it working. And that, of course, leads to my point number 3, which is a lot of the feedback we get from testers and from other developers and institutions is, well, it's certainly constructive, but it is perhaps not phrased in the most positive of terms. And one of the things that I struggle with, and I think probably most developers struggle with, is avoiding letting my ego get involved. When someone looks at my code and says, that's really poorly written, or tests my project and says, that doesn't work at all, it's not about me. And it's something that I always struggle to remember, and I imagine a lot of other people do too. It's about the code or the project, and the thing to do is fix it, because it's really not about us. And if we fix it, we can get our development in much faster than if we, for example, argue that, no, it might be better. And I know I've certainly been guilty of that in the past, but I do my best to avoid it now. So assuming we get through the testing, we get the project in, that's not the end of a development project, especially not in something in a large system that is constantly evolving. It has to be maintained. And unfortunately, maintaining big features is just plain hard. And I don't really have a lot of advice. However, the two things that I have learned are, if you're designing a feature and it's very specific, if you can make it a little less specific so that other people will want to use it, it's a lot more likely that someone else will help you with maintaining that feature in newer versions of Koha. And if you write any features that are really extraordinarily specific, you really just have to go in with the expectation that you're going to be maintaining it yourself. And unfortunately, I don't know of any way around that. However, if we get to that point, I am happy to say that is, in fact, the end of the development process. And we can start over with planning a new project and continuing our contributions to Koha. So, with that, does anyone have any questions?
Questions? It seems there are no further questions. Okay, let's go. Can you see it? No, anytime here.
Okay. What can developers do to perhaps prioritize potential facing as guidance for people who are signing up?
Tomas, do you think you could repeat the question?
Here. Hi. What would be your advice for people with long-standing patches? So they promote.
So unfortunately, that's really difficult because there are a lot of long-standing patches. My strategy with patches that have really been waiting for testing for a long time is try and find out why. A lot of people, or at least a lot of developers will know that when I write a patch and it's not getting any response, it's not uncommon for me to contact people and say, I'm not asking you to actually test this patch right now, but could you tell me anything you know about why people aren't testing it? Because a lot of times it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, which is people really hate saying, sorry, that's no good. And if there's something that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, it might be something very minor, but that can often scare people away from actually testing those patches. And as the author, it seems like everyone's ignoring them, when perhaps it's more like people are looking at it saying, oh, I don't want to be the person who, potentially threatens this other contributor. I'll wait and I'll hope someone else does. Does that address your question at all?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jared.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks.